In 1991, Jerry Seinfeld was sitting in Jay Leno's kitchen, flipping through a Hemmings Motor news magazine. He spotted a 1958 Porsche 356A Speedster. He bought it. That single afternoon, in someone else's kitchen, launched one of the most extraordinary private car collections ever assembled. A collection that, at its peak, held around 150 cars, more than 80 of them Porsches, including a car that Steve McQueen drove in Le Mans that Seinfeld eventually sold for approximately $25 million. One magazine, one kitchen, 34 years of consequences. This is the full story of what that afternoon cost Jerry Seinfeld, and exactly why he has never once regretted it. The kitchen moment that started everything. Seinfeld bought what he calls his first collectible Porsche back in 1991, a 1958 Speedster, after thumbing through a Hemmings magazine in Leno's kitchen. That sentence needs to be unpacked carefully because it contains the entire origin story of one of the most significant private car collections in automotive history. Jerry Seinfeld was already famous in 1991. He was not a struggling comedian flipping through classifieds for cheap transportation. He was a man sitting in a friend's kitchen, looking at a car magazine, and being captured by something he did not fully understand yet. Seinfeld told Leno, "I bought it because I thought it was pretty. All Porsche is about is minimalism. There are no stupid lines on a Porsche. Everything is there because it makes sense." That philosophy, minimalism as beauty, function as form, nothing added that does not need to be there, would define every significant purchase Seinfeld made for the next 3 decades. When Seinfeld bought the Speedster, people were dumbfounded as to why he would spend so much for a car that would require so much restoration. His response was, "My whole point was, it's perfect exactly as it is." The Speedster that started everything was eventually sold at auction in 2016 for $682,000. What Seinfeld paid in 1991 was not publicly disclosed, but a comparable 356A Speedster in the early 1990s collector market would have sold for between $40,000 and $80,000. The gap between what he paid and what it eventually fetched gives you a precise measure of what that afternoon in Leno's kitchen set in motion. And the Speedster was the least valuable car the kitchen moment eventually produced. The 1949 Porsche 356-2 Gmünd, the car before Porsche was Porsche. Before the 1958 Speedster, for any of the cars that followed, there is one vehicle in Seinfeld's collection that sits above all others in terms of historical significance. The 356-2 was the hand-built production vehicle based on Volkswagen parts and the template for everything that came after. It featured an all-aluminum body, hand-formed by coach builders in a converted sawmill in Gmünd, Austria, because Porsche did not yet have a proper factory. The engine produces 35 to 40 horsepower. 52 of these were built. Seinfeld owns chassis number 40, all original. Seinfeld's crown jewel is the 1949 Porsche 356-2 Gmünd, one of the 50 hand-built cars produced at Porsche's first factory in Austria. This is the car he drove in the Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee episode featuring Jay Leno, picking up his friend in a vehicle older than commercial television and driving through Los Angeles in something that predates the company's official establishment as a car manufacturer. The moment where 2 of the most famous car collectors in America drove around in a car with less power than a modern lawnmower says everything about what both men actually value. The 3 unrestored 356s that covered a decade of Porsche history. Seinfeld brought to Jay Leno's garage a 1958 Porsche 356A Speedster, a 1949 Porsche 356A Carrera, and a 1956 Porsche 356A European, all of them unrestored originals. 3 cars, all from the same short production window in the late 1950s, covering almost the entire Porsche product range for the period. Leno is also responsible for Seinfeld owning the 1959 Carrera. If Porsche made a supercar in the 1950s, this was it. The specifications the owner chose for this very car were all performance-based. A Speedster seat only on the driver's side, RSK brakes and wheels borrowed from the more aggressive 718 RSK racing variant, and a special air intake. Someone had ordered it from the factory as close to a racing machine as Porsche would allow. Seinfeld acquired it and kept it in that original unrestored state, because to him, the history embedded in the patina was more valuable than the appearance of freshness. Seinfeld's philosophy on Unrestored classics is explicit. He told Leno, during their Jay Leno's garage appearance, that the completely original 1958 Porsche 356A Speedster is perfect exactly as it is. When a car has never been touched, every scratch, every patina mark, every worn edge is a document. Restore it, and you erase that document. Seinfeld refuses to erase them. The 1955 Porsche 550 Spyder, the ghost of a tragedy. Among the notable cars in Seinfeld's collection is a 1955 Porsche 550 Spyder, the same model in which James Dean died on September 30, 1955. Dean's car was chassis 550-0055. Seinfeld's is a different chassis, but the model is identical, and only 90 Porsche 550 Spyders were built between 1953 and 1956. Seinfeld also has a 1955 Porsche 550 RS among his most notable vehicles. The RS designation stands for Rennsport, meaning motorsport in German, which Porsche used for its most serious competition variants. The 550 RS was developed specifically for endurance racing and won its class at the 1956 Mille Miglia and several other significant events. The combination of the model's rarity, its direct emotional connection to one of the most famous tragedies in automotive history, and its genuine racing pedigree makes the 550 one of the most layered cars in Seinfeld's entire collection. The 1958 Porsche 356A 1500 GS GT Carrera Speedster, the $1.54 million lawsuit. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld was sued in 2019 by a company claiming it purchased his luxury 1958 Porsche for $1.54 million, only to discover it was fake. Collector Fica Frio Limited filed the lawsuit in Manhattan federal court. Fica Frio's representatives paid $1.54 million at a March 2016 auction in Amelia Island, Florida. The auction summary boasted that it was from the Jerry Seinfeld collection and described it as a stunning example of a rare thoroughbred Porsche. The firm that purchased the ultra-rare 356A 1500 GS GT Carrera Speedster sued Seinfeld, claiming the car was counterfeit. Seinfeld, in turn, sued European Collectibles, who he had originally purchased the car from. The GS GT designation indicates the highest performance specification of the 356A Carrera, with a twin-cam four-cylinder engine developed specifically for racing. The claim that the car was not authentic would, if true, mean that the most performance-significant version of the Speedster that started Seinfeld's collection was itself a misrepresentation. The lawsuit illustrates precisely how consequential the identification of these cars has become. A single disputed letter of provenance, a question about one body panel or one engine number, can swing a valuation by 7 figures. The Porsche 959, the car that was federally illegal. Something about the Porsche 959 grabbed famous people in the 1980s, including Microsoft founder Bill Gates and tennis player Martina Navratilova. Porsche only built 337 examples, and Seinfeld picked his up for around $700,000. It was initially developed for Group B rallying. The series was canceled for being too dangerous before the 959 could go on sale. The 959 was the first production car to use a twin-turbocharged flat-six engine and the first to combine sophisticated all-wheel drive with electronically controlled torque distribution. It produced 450 horsepower in an era when that number was reserved for purpose-built racing machines. It was also federally illegal to drive in the United States when new because it did not meet American emissions and safety standards. Bill Gates had his 959 impounded at the Port of Seattle for years while a legal argument played out. The United States government eventually created the show or display exemption specifically to allow cars like the 959 to be legally imported for collection purposes. Seinfeld paid $700,000 for his example, which, given the 959's importance to the history of automotive technology, is one of the more conservative valuations in his entire collection. The 1966 Porsche 911, the first one America ever saw. Seinfeld spent $650,000 to purchase and restore a Porsche 911, the first of its kind imported to the United States. The vehicle had previously been owned by Ferry Porsche, the son of Porsche's founder. This car carries 2 layers of historical significance that stack on top of each other. The 1966 model was the first 911 officially imported into the United States. Every 911 sold in America since, every one of the hundreds of thousands of examples that have shaped American driving culture for 60 years, traces the beginning of its American lineage back to this specific vehicle. And it was owned by Ferry Porsche, the man who designed the original 356 and oversaw the development of the 911 itself. Seinfeld paid $650,000 for a car that is simultaneously the ancestor of every American 911 and a personal artifact of the Porsche family history. The number is not excessive. It is arguably too low. The 1969 Porsche 917K, the car that made Seinfeld $25 million. Of all the cars that passed through Seinfeld's collection, none produced a financial outcome as extraordinary as the 1969 Porsche 917K Chassis 022. This 917K is one of two actual race cars used to film the 1971 movie Le Mans, in which Steve McQueen played fictional racer Michael Delaney. Chassis 917-022 was delivered to McQueen's Solar Productions in 1970, finished in its iconic powder blue and orange Gulf oil livery, and shipped to France's Circuit de la Sarthe for filming. An air-cooled Type 12 V12 engine sits behind the driver, producing 580 horsepower and 366 pound-feet of torque in a vehicle weighing under 1,800 pounds. Seinfeld bought it in 2001 for approximately $1.3 million and held it for over 2 decades. Overseeing a full restoration completed in 2024 that included a complete rebuild of the 5.0-liter V12. In January 2025, the car went to Mecum's Kissimmee auction as the headline lot. Bidding reached $25 million, which would have set a new record for any Porsche ever sold at auction. Seinfeld turned it down. Weeks later, he revealed on Spike Feresten's Spike's Car radio podcast that the 917K had been sold privately for approximately $25 million to an anonymous collector, making it the most expensive Porsche ever sold, beating the $14.08 million that another Le Mans 917K fetched in 2017. He paid $1.3 million in 2001. He sold it for approximately $25 million in 2025. The 917K returned roughly $23 million in profit over 24 years. The car that a Hemmings magazine, in Jay Leno's kitchen, set him toward in 1991, ultimately produced, through a chain of increasingly consequential purchases, the most financially significant single automotive transaction any private collector has completed in the history of the Porsche marque. The collection that remains. At one point, Seinfeld owned around 80 Porsches, but he has sold off many of them, the last batch of 16 in 2024, going for a collective $22 million. Among the 2024 sales, the 1959 Porsche 718 RSK Spyder fetched $2.86 million. The all-aluminum open-top race car had featured in Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee when Seinfeld picked up Kevin Hart. He still owns at least 30 to 43 Porsches. He has chassis number 46 of the 1951 356 SL Gmünd Coupe, a 1952 356 America, a 1958 356A 1500 GS GT Carrera Speedster, a 1963 356B 2000 GS GT Carrera 2 Coupe, and a 1966 356C SC Dutch Polizei convertible that Porsche made exclusively for the Dutch police force. His most treasured possession, the car he has said he values above all others, is a 1970 Targa Florio winning Porsche 90803, chassis number 008. This is not a car associated with the race through documentation or provenance. It is the actual car that crossed the finish line first at the 1970 Targa Florio, one of the oldest and most grueling road races in history, run through the mountain roads of Sicily. Chassis 008 is the winning car, not a tribute, not a commemorative, the car itself. According to the Porsche retailer in Palm Springs, Jerry Seinfeld is the most prolific Porsche collector in the world. That title began with a Hemmings magazine in a kitchen in 1991. It has since produced somewhere north of $47 million in auction and private sale proceeds across cars he has chosen to part with, while retaining at minimum 30 of the most historically significant examples he has accumulated across 3.5 decades. Jay Leno's kitchen did not cost Jerry Seinfeld millions. It made him tens of millions, and it gave him the most extraordinary relationship between a private collector and a single automotive marque that the car world has ever seen.